Good day. Today's daf is daf Pei Zayin. We are at the Gemara on the 1, 2, 3, 6 line, the beginning of the Gemara on Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, 6 lines down. And the Mishnah that we just learned taught us the various kinds of wine, the ideal wine to be used in the libations in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Nisachim. And the Gemara points out an inconsistency in 2 lines of the Mishnah. Because on the one hand, we said, Ein miviin lo matok v'lo mivushal v'lo miushan b'im hevi puzzle. That on the one hand, if you bring yayin matok, which we'll define in a moment, or cooked wine or smoked wine, if you're not supposed to bring it, and if you do bring it, it's invalid. You need to what you did with it, the libation that you did with it, is not a valid libation. You need to bring another libation. Now, what is matok? Rashi on Pei Vavam about, if we take a look, 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up from the bottom of the page, it says matok hainu me'elav v'lo machmat hashemesh. It means that it's sweet. Matok is the way we traditionally define the word, and it means that it's sweet, but not because of the sun. As we'll see, that's going to be important in a moment because of a different kind of wine where the wine is sweetened as a result of grapes exposure to the sun. Maybe it's something like raisin wine, but this is not. This is where the grapes themselves are sweet. But then Rashi notes another interpretation, Lashon Acher. Tirosh shelo avru alav arba'im yom. It's the crop of the grapes. It's where the grape produce, grape harvest is less than 40 days old. So those are 2 possible interpretations of what matok means. But v'hakatani reisha. Now we back into the Gemara on daf Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Last word on the line, v'hakatani reisha. But we said earlier in our Mishnah, ein meviin es Heliostion, that you're not allowed to bring Heliostion wine, v'im hevi kosher, but b'diavad it is kosher. Now, what is Heliostion wine? So back into the Rashi Ksiv Yad on Pei Vavam Abet. Again, 1, 2, 3, now 6 lines up from the bottom of the Rashi Ksiv Yad. Heliostion, yayin matok, it's sweet wine, machmas hashemesh, that is a result of the sun, shahayu Tolan as ha'anavim lehishamesh, that you hang the grapes so that they can have more time in the sun. And so as a result, maybe it's some kind of, like I said, raisin wine. But in any event, it's sweet as a result of exposure to the sun. And so in that situation, we say that if it was b'diavad, that you did bring it, it would still be valid, even though the situation when it came to regular matok wine where the grapes themselves are sweet, we said not only are you not supposed to bring it, but even heavy puzzle. So 2 possible answers. Amaravina krochu tnei, that actually you're supposed to combine it and learn it. Now, what does that mean? Rashi, now we'll go into Rashi at the top of the daf, the traditional Rashi, last of the Y lines at the top of the daf, krochu tnei, ein meviin a heliostion, lefi she'ein meviin lo matok v'chulu, v'im heavy puzzle. What you're supposed to do is combine that, really drop the words v'im hevi kasher that it had in the Mishnah and just read that into the next lines of the Mishnah. That not only, why is it that you're not supposed to bring Helioston wine? It's because you're not also allowed to bring sweet wine, and if you do bring it, it's going to be invalid. And so that's so Ravina's explanation is to basically say that all kinds of sweet wine, not only is it invalid l'chatchila, but it's invalid b'diavad, post facto as well. Ravashi offers an alternative interpretation. He says no, chulya deshim shalomis, when it comes to sweetness that comes to through the sun exposure, that's not going to be disgusting. And so as a result, that is going to be kosher b'diavad. But chulya de peira meis. But when the sweetness is as a result of the fruit itself, so then that is going to be disgusting, and therefore we're not going to use it. Now Tosfos here uses what we just said to show that when the Rashi Ksiv Yad offered 2 interpretations, one that it's sweet by itself for matok, one that it's sweet by itself, and the other that it's a new produce. Tosfos points out that this Gemara seems to contradict that interpretation. Take a look at Tosfos top of the narrow lines in Tosos on Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. Lashon Acher. What was the Lashon Acher of Rashi? Perish bekuntris tirosh shelo avru alav arba'im yom. It means that it's the crop that the harvest that didn't that hadn't been around for 40 days. Below yitachein, but it's not actually the right interpretation. Because right here we've just learned im hevi puzzle. That if it even b'diavad, this sweet wine is going to be invalid. Uperak hamocher, but back over in Baba Basra at the end of or near the end of Baba Basra, Tadik Zion Amud Aleph, Tani Rebbe Chia Yayin Megito Lo Yevi Ve'im Hevi Kasher. That when you take wine from the vat, meaning new wine, you shouldn't do it, but if you do it, it's going to be kosher. So therefore, Benira Kilashan Acher Shaperish, that it looks like the other explanation is the right one. Matok, what does misweet mean? Hainu me'alav, it means sweet by itself through the grapes themselves, velo machman hashemis, and not with the result of exposure to the sun. Okay, so now we're at the two dots, 1 to 5 lines down from the start of the Gemara. Ain maybe in Yashan Divrei Rebbe. Rebbe said that you're not supposed to bring old wine, whereas the rabbi said that it's kosher. So Amar Chizkiah, my time of the Rebbe. What's the source for Rebbe's prohibition of bringing old wine, at least lichatchila? So Amar Kra lakeves yayin. So the pasuk in Bamidbar Perek Kavchet Pasuk Yudalid ties together or juxtaposes the word lamb with the word wine, even though the implication of the pasuk is that how much wine is used for a lamb, but the ma keves ben shnaso, but the juxtaposition tells us that because just as a lamb needs to be under a year old, so too wine needs to be under a year old in order for it to be valid in the Beis Hamikdash. That's the lesson that Rebbe would learn. 1 second though. If you learn that lesson, ima keves ben shtei shanim pasul, that would imply that just as a lamb, when it's in its second year, it's going to be invalid as an offering. Av yayin ben shtei shanim pasul. So too would wine in its second year be invalid. If you say, okay, so fine, according to Rebbe, he would say that older wine is invalid even b'diavad. V'hatanya, however, we learned in a brisa, yayin ben shtei shanim lo yavi, you shouldn't bring it lichatchila to wine that's in its second year, being heavy kosher. But if you do bring it, it's kosher. Now, man shamat le to amar lo yavi. Who is it that says that you shouldn't bring it? That's Rebbe, who said in our Mishnah, Ein Mevi in Yashin, that you don't bring at least lichatchila old wine. Rebbe, the Ka'amar im heavy kosher, and yet this brisa specifically says that if you did bring it, it is kosher. And so as a result, it can't be a biblical connection of lamb and wine can't be the basis for Rebbe's learning. Because if he were to learn it, you have to learn all the laws. And just as you can use wine that is under a year, like the lamb that's under a year, you would have to say that wine that's over a year is like a lamb that's over a year. And just as a lamb over the year is prohibited b'diavad, so too the wine would be prohibited post facto as well. So Ella Amarava, so Rava offers a different source for Rebbe's teaching that the wine, 1 year old wine is the best. That under 1 year old wine is the best. Hainu time into Rebbe. Here's the reason. Tiksiv al teire yayin ki yisadam. This pasuk in Mishlei Perek Kaf Gimel pasuk Lamed Aleph says, "Don't look upon the wine when it's red," meaning that you should, don't be tempted by attractive things. Is essentially what the pasuk is teaching us. But here we're taking it very literally, as Rashi says, Hainu Taima. This is Rashi 3, 6, 9, 10 lines down in the narrow lines that from the top of Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. Hainu Taima. She'ein maybe Yashan. Here's the reason why you don't bring old wine. Diksiv al teira yain ki yisadam. Right, that you should not look at wine when it's red. Delo have a chush of yayin. The point is that this pasuk is effectively telling us what is considered important wine, and important wine is only wine adom. It's when it's red. V'shana rishona, and early in its youth, wine in that first year, yeshbo ikar admomit. That's when it is its reddest, and so as a result, that's when it's best. Tfei beyond that, it isn't quite as red. And it's not, basically this is rejecting Chizkiah's answer. And therefore, the point is that although it's ideal to use wine when it's reddest, it's still red even after the first year, and therefore it would still be valid, even though you wouldn't want to do it lechatchila. And so that fits with Rebbe's opinion in the Brisa that in fact you're not supposed to bring wine that's in its second year, but if you do, it's still going to be kosher. Okay, so now we get to the next two dots, and we're now ein meviin lo min hadalios. We said that you're not supposed to bring a wine that is suspended on trellises, but rather avudim. We said that you should bring wine from worked fields, from plowed fields, from cultivated vineyards. And so, right, from min kramim ha'avodin was the language in our Mishnah. So Tana, kramim ha'avodim pamayim b'shana. When we say that it needs to be cultivated, it means that the vineyard has been has been worked twice during the year. As Rashi tells us, Havudim chafurim pamayim. It's been dug twice. It's been, essentially twice the ground has been tilled, and the things that are necessary for the ground have been done. Rav Yosef havalei karna de pardesa. So Rav Yosef had a corner of a vineyard. The Rafik Bay Tvei Rivka. And you know what he did? He did a bunch of extra digging in it. Specifically, as Rashi tells us in the next Rashi, we're now right opposite the Rabbeinu Gershom on the right-hand side of the page. Rafik Le Tvei Rivka Shechafru Pamayim. He did exactly what you're supposed to do for the vineyard that is going to produce the wine for the Beis Hamikdash, meaning the best wine is going to be wine in a vineyard that was dug twice. And what ended up happening? V'avad chamra didari maya al chadrein, and he ended up creating wine that required water. For every one of water, it required two parts. What does that mean? That's highlighting the fact that their wine was very powerful, and as a result, they would add extra water to it. And here you would add double the water, as Rashi says. Next Rashi, v'dari maya al chad trin shahayu yachol lemozgo b'mayim kfalim, that you would use double the amount of water in order to mix it with the wine to dilute the wine. Miyayin acher, when you compare it to other kinds of wine. The yayin de alma dari achad tlasa, that every 1 unit of pure wine required 3 units of water. V'zeu makabel al chad shisha, whereas this one required for every 1 unit of wine 6 units of water. V'hainu al chad train, and that's what it means by on 1, 2, meaning you needed to double the amount of water that you would add to it, the yayin acher, of other wine. So the bottom line is that it means that every bit of wine that Rav Yosef produced effectively produced almost double the amount of drinkable wine. And so as a result, his wine would be much more valuable. Okay, so now back into the Gemara. The next quote from our Mishnah: Lo hayakonsin osan bechatzavim gedolos. Don't put it into big casks, but rather you should put it in chaviyot, to barrels, into smaller barrels. So Tana chaviyot. What are the small barrels that you should use? Kadiyot, ludiyot, uveinuniyot. The jugs that are from lud that are medium. Ve'ein minichen otan shtayim shtayim. And don't put them two by two. Ela achas achas. You should put them one by one. Rashi Ksiv Yad helps us understand what exactly, why don't you want to put them two by two? So take a look at the Rashi Ksiv Yad. It's right opposite the last line in the Gemara in the end of the parak of the ninth parak. Ein menichin otan shtayim shtayim. Zo b'tzad zo. Don't put them next to each other. Shema yiskalkel achas. Maybe one of them will go bad. V'teriach hevrata v'titkalkel gam hi. And now it will stink up the one that's next to it, and it will get ruined as well. So you have to be careful. If you're going to be using this wine for the Beit HaMikdash, you want to make sure that it's separate from other and cannot be contaminated with other impurities. Okay, Ketzad Bodek. So our Mishnah said that there was somebody in the Beit Hamikdash who would check to see whether there were impurities in the wine. And what would he do? It was Gizbar, one of the treasurers of the Beit Hamikdash, Yoshev v'kanabiyado. He would sit and he would have a reed in his hand. Zorak Hagir Hikish Pakana. When the gear, the froth at the top of the sediments would start coming out of the pour, Hikish Pakana, he would hit with the reed. So what does that mean? So the Gemara explains by citing a brisa, Tana Zarak Higir al Shmarim. He would when it's Zarak Hagir shel Shmarim. What do we mean by Hagir? We mean the froth that's on top of the sediments. So Gizber Hikish Bakana. That's when the treasurer would hit with the reed. The Lema Le Memar. Why not just to have the treasurer say something? So Messiah Le Rabbi Yochanan. It's a proof to what Rabbi Yochanan says. The Rabbi Yochanan Kashem Shadibor Yafa Libesamim. When it comes to spices, when you speak around them, that somehow makes the spices even more powerful. Maybe this is a source for talking to your plants. Kach Dibor Ralo Yayin. But on the other flip side, with speaking when you're dealing with wine, that's not a good thing. Maybe something in the carbon dioxide that we produce, and when you speak, you have produced more carbon dioxide. So maybe that's going to make the wine worse. In any event, the bottom line is that this shows that they wouldn't tell the person to stop pouring by speaking. They would tell the person to stop pouring by banging with the reed. Okay, then the Mishnah then said, we're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up in from the narrow lines of the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said, we said that the wine that has mold in it is going to be invalid. We said kamachim, which is some kind of white substance, which is why its root is in the word kamach, flour. But the idea is some kind of mold. So by Rabbi Yochanan, Hikdishu, what happens if you sanctified such wine for Nesachim? Ma'usha Yilka al Mashum Balmum, would you get lashes because you've sanctified something that is blemished? Kevan de Puzzle Kival Mum Dummy, since it's invalid, it's like it's got a blemish, and therefore, if you were to sanctify an animal that was blemished, you would be subject to lashes. So too, you'll be subject to lashes if you sanctify the wine for Nesachim, if it's blemished. Odilma, Ein Balmum Elabahema. Or maybe when it comes to the blemishes that are going to result in lashes, that's only for animals. Teku. In the end, we say it's unresolved, and so as a result, best not to sanctify such wine. Tana Rabbanan. So now to conclude our Gemara on this parak, we've talked about where various things should come from in order to get the best. So that we cite a brisa that highlights where to get the best animals. Elim mimoav. That if you want the best rams, go to Moab. Kvasim mechevron. You want the best lambs, you go to Hebron. Agalim, best calves, misharon. Go to Sharon. Gozalot mehar melech. You want the best birds, go to Har Melech. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mevin Kvasim Shegabhan Kirachban. If you want to know what's a good lamb, take a look at a lamb whose height is basically the same as their width. So, Amar Rava Bar Rav Shila, my time of the Rabbi Yehuda. What's the source for Rebbe Yehuda's statement, Tiksiv, because it says in Yeshayahu, and this is Perek dealing with the Jewish people finally, being patient for Hashem, and Hashem, supporting the Jewish people and helping the Jewish people. Diksiv Yirev Miknecha Bayomahu Kar Nirchav, that your live stick will graze on that day a broad lamb. And so as a result, that the idea being that when Hashem is really being helpful to you, your lambs will be as broad as they are high, and so that's the support for the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. So ksiv al chamosecha. So now we have having mentioned one teaching of Rabbi Bar of Shila, we mentioned another. Ksiv that also relates to Yeshayahu. Ksiv al chamosayak Yerushalayim hivkadesh shomrim kol hayom v'kol halayla tamid lo yecheshu. That upon your walls, Yerushalayim, I posted guardians, and Rashi tells us that those guardians are malachim, are angels, all day and all night. They will never be silent. Hamazkirim es Hashem al domi lachem. That you who remind Hashem, don't be silent. So my Amri, what are these people who are the guardians saying if they're not silent, if they're not supposed to be silent? What are they saying? Hachi Amar Rava Bar of Shila. So Rava Bar of Shila, who answered the last question, answers this question as well. Atatakum terachem Tzion. You will arise and show Tzion mercy. So essentially, the angels are telling Hashem, hey, you need to have mercy on Yerushalayim, given that you have destroyed it. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Bona Yerushalayim Hashem. The builder of Yerushalayim is Hashem, and so as a result, that's what they're saying as they anticipate Hashem's rebuilding of Yerushalayim. Umikara mai havu amri. And what did they say in the beginning? Meaning Rashi tells us Kodem Shechara, before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So Amar Rabba Bar Shila. So Rabba Bar Shila comes to the rescue again. Kivachar Hashem b'Tzion, Iva lemoshav lo. So for Hashem has chosen Zion, Hashem has desired it for God's dwelling. And so as a result, again, maybe the Hashem returned to being able to have the angels say this statement rather than Atatakum Terachem Tzion, so that we have a rebuilt Yerushalayim. So Hadron Allah Kol Karbanot Hatzibor, Hadron Allah Kol Karbanot Hatzibor, Hadron Allah Kol Karbanot Hatzibor. So now we come to the 10th chapter. So Shtei Midos, and this chapter begins a discussion of the different measuring vessels that were used in the Beis Hamikdash, how many there were, what their sizes were, and how they were used. So Shtei Midos Shel Yavesh Hayu B'Mikdash. According to the Tanakama, there were two measuring utensils for dry measurements, two sizes. Doesn't mean that there were only two, there were just two sizes. Isaron, a full Isaron, V'chatzi Isaron, and a half Isaron. Rabbi Meir disagrees. He says that there were three. Isaron, V'chatzi Isaron. And we're going to explain in the Gemara why there are two that are the exact same. We're going to see that, in fact, they were a little bit different, but we'll see that in the Gemara. Isaron, mehayesh mishamish. What did they do the Isaron with? What did they use the Isaron measurement for? Shabo hayamoded l'kol menachot. That's how they measured all the mincha offerings. So lo hayamoded lo bishlosh lapar. Now, some mincha offerings would require 3 isaron. For example, as we saw in even today's laning in the yesterday's laning in the for Chol HaMoed Pesach. But I guess it's in every day's laning in the maftir for Pesach. We note the fact that there are 3 isaron for a mincha offering that goes along with a bull sacrifice. V'lo b'shel shnayim la'ayil, and 2 for a ram. And so what the Mishnah is saying is don't measure. They would not measure all 3 in a 3 isaron vessel. They would not measure 2 in a 2 isaron vessel. Elamodanon esronot. Rather, they would measure the isaron, one isaron, and they would do it multiple times in order to have the isaron, whatever, however many isaronim that they would need. Chatzi isaron hayam mishamish. What was the purpose of the half isaron? Shabo hayam modeh. Chavite Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol would bring a chavitin offering every day. It was a full isaron, but half was offered in the morning and half was in the afternoon. And so the half that was measured in the morning would be measured using the half isaron measurement. So mechza baboker umechza bein arbaim. Again, half in the morning and half in the afternoon. So Tanya, Haya Rebbe Meir Omer, Ma Talmud Lomer, Isaron Lekeves Hechad. So now we're going to answer the question, how does Rebbe Meir know that we need to have two different Isaron measurements? Well, the Torah itself repeats the word Isaron in connection with, in Bamidbar Parakuf Chet, Pasuk Kaf Tet, and actually, there's some it's repeated a bunch of times, this concept of Isaron. So that Isaron, Melamed Shishtei Isaronot, Hayu B'Mikdash. It shows that there were two Isaron measurements in the Beit HaMikdash. Echad Gadush, the Echad Machuk. One, so what were the difference between the two? So answering the question that we anticipated when we learned the Mishnah. One was heaped, one was piled up, meaning that it was structured in order to create, right, an ability to not have it as a flat surface to the top, but rather you would pile it up, and so that the middle would be a little higher and it would slope down towards the edge, towards the end of towards the rim on each side. And so the heaped amount would be equal to an isaron. And one of them, be'echad machuk, and one of them was leveled, meaning you would sweep across the top of the other measurement, and that would determine how much you would have, and and that would be exactly an isaron. So most people would call the latter an isaron measuring tool. The others would be less than an isaron, but you would pile it up high above the rim, and it would also then when you include the area that's above the rim that's piled up, that would also equal an isaron. And Rashi helps us out explaining exactly this whole concept. Take a look at the Rashi. We'll now look at the Rashi Ksiv Yad. I'm sorry, not the Rashi Ksiv Yad. The Rashi at the top of the page, and it's the first Rashi on the Gemara. Just before the Ksiv Yad. Echad Gadush, Shelo Hayabo Isaron, Elaim Kain Godsho, meaning that the utensil would not actually hold a full-fledged Isaron if you didn't pile it up high above the rim. Ve'echad Machuk, Shah Machuk Haya Gadol Kolkach, the one that you would be able to smooth it out was sufficiently large, Shikesha Haya Machuk, when you smoothed out the top, Hayabo Isaron, it would still hold a full-fledged Isaron. So Gadash, back into the Gemara, and so now we're last line of the Gemara, middle of the line. Gadash Shabo Hayamode L'chol Menachos, and you would use the heaped one in order to measure the mincha offerings. If you're making a regular mincha offering, you use the one that heaps up, and so it would go over the edge, over the rim. Machuk. Shabo Hayamodin L'chavito Kohen Gadol, but you would use the more precise one when you were measuring for the Kohen Gadol. This is all according to Rebbe Meir, and that again, this is the Brisa, and we are speaking in Rebbe Meir. This is Rebbe Meir Omer. The Chachamim disagree, and they say the following: Lo hayasham ela isaron echad. No, there was only one isaron measuring utensil there. Shene'amar be'isaron echad lekeves ha'echad, because the Torah says, this is in Bamidbar Parak Kaftet Pasuk Dalid, that one isaron for the one lamb. Im kain ma Talmud lomer isaron. Well, then what do the Chachamim do with the pasuk that Rebbe Meir used to teach us that there were two different isaron measuring utensils? L'rabos chatzi isaron. No, the isaron is telling us that there were two measuring utensils that relate to an isaron. One was a full isaron and the other was a half isaron. But Rebbe Meir, well, one second. What does Rebbe Meir do with the pasuk or how does Rebbe Meir know that there was a half isaron measuring utensil? Chatzi isaron minale. How does he know about the half isaron measuring utensil? Because he agrees that there was one of those as well. Nafgale me the isaron. Well, what is that? Pasuk does not actually say isaron. It says the isaron. The isaron echad lekeves echad. It's and. So the and teaches us that there needs to be an extra measuring utensil that's related to isaron, and that was going to be a half isaron. The Rabbanan, what do the rabbis do with that vav that Rabbi Meir uses to teach us the half isaron? Vav lo darshe. They don't learn from just a simple addition of the word letter vav in the Torah. Rabbi Meir, hi v'isaron echad lekeves ha'echad my avidle. What does he do with the one isaron for the lamb? Meaning, what is he doing with the pasuk that the Chachamim use to teach us that there should only be one measuring utensil that is an isar of an isaron size? Hahu shelo yimdod lo b'shel shlosha lepar v'lo b'shel shnayim la'ayil. No, that's how Rabbi Meir learns that you don't have either a 3 isaron vessel for a bull or a 2 isaron vessel for a ram, but rather you just use the same 1 isaron vessel over and over again as many times as necessary. The Rabbanan, how do the rabbis learn that lesson? Nafgalohum and nikudo. They learn it from a dot that is on top of the word in the Torah. The Tanya, as we have a brisa that specifically teaches this lesson, Amar Rabbi Yossi says, Lama nakud vav shebeemsa isaron. Why is there a dot in the word over the word isaron in the Sefer Torah? Shel isaron rishon shel yom tov rishon shel chag. Why is it mentioned in connection with the word isaron and the first day of Sukkot's offering? Shelo yimdod, it's to tell us that you don't measure lo b'shel shlosha lepar, v'lo b'shel shnayim la'ayil. You're not going to use a 3 isaron measuring unit cup for a bull, and you're not going to use a 2 isaron measuring vessel for a ram, but rather, again, you use the 1 isaron. The Rebbe Meir, what does Rebbe Meir do with this dot? Nakudo lo darish. He does not derive any lessons from the dots in the Torah. Okay. So now we're at the 2 dots on Pei Zayin Amabet, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down. Chatzi isaron mehaya mishamish. So our Mishnah noted what did the half isaron do? Shabo hayamoded lachavite kohen gadol. That's what was used to measure the chavitim mincha offering of the kohen gadol. Moded. 1 second. Would he measure the a half isaron to begin with? After all, we learned Uraminhu. 1 second. We have a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah that we saw about 37 days ago, back on Nun Amabet, where it says Chavite Kohen Gadol lo hayubon chatzain, that you don't bring the mincha of the chavitin of a Kohen Gadol was not brought in halves, meaning you had to bring the full isaron completely. Ela maybe isaron shalem v'chotzehu. Rather, you bring the full isaron and then you divide it, half for the morning and half for the afternoon. So as a result, therefore, how can you say that there was a half measuring cup? We don't need a half measuring cup because we use the full. So Amar of Sheshis, my moded nami de katani mechalik. No, when we say that you measured it, it wasn't really a measurement, but rather it was divided. You used it to divide into the other one. So Baimine Rami Bar Chama. So again, you would have the 1 isaron measuring unit, and then you would move half of it into the half isaron measuring unit, and that would be how you would be sure that you get exactly half. So by Mine Rami Bar Chama me Rav Chisda Chatzi isaron leRebbi Meir Gadush Haya O Machukaya. Well, we saw that again, Rabbi Meir says that when it comes to the full isaron measuring cup, you had one that was a little bit larger, and therefore you could smooth out the top, and still have a full isaron. And the other one was a little smaller, and you would have to pile it up, the flour, in order to create the full isaron amount in it. And so as a result, we have two for the full isaron. Which measuring approach was used for the half one? Meaning, would you use it for would it be sufficiently large that you would smooth out the top in order to get half isaron, or would you need to pile it high in order to get half isaron? So so the Gemara answers the Tibai Lach Rabbanan. But one second, why not ask this question according to the rabbis? After all, we don't know what the rabbis do at all. Well, the Rabbanan, the Gemara explains, Isaron Gufei coming by Lahu. You don't have to ask the question about the half Isaron. We can ask that question about the full Isaron. Gadosh Haya Omachakoy. My question for the rabbis would be the full Isaron. Which kind did you use? Was it, they only had one. So was it the full the one that you would smooth out in order to get the full amount, or would you have to pile it high in order to get the full amount? So Amar Le, mid Rebbe Meir, Nishma le Rebbe Meir, or mid Rebbe Meir, Nishma le Rabbanan. You know what? I can figure it out, the answer to both of these questions, by looking at Rebbe Meir's approach. Mid Amar Rebbe Meir Isaron Machuk. The fact that Rebbe Meir says that you need a leveled one, Chatzi Isaron Nami Machuk, in order to measure the chavitin, right? That's what we said, right? He said that we need the leveled one in order to measure the chavitin. So the chatzi isaron nami machuk, the half isaron, which is also used for the chavitin, would also be leveled. But the Rebbe Meir machuk, Rabbanan nami machuk, and given the fact that the Rebbe Meir says that the one that would be used for the chavitin is leveled, the rabbis also need it to be leveled as well. And so as a result, that's the explanation. So, by mine Rami Bar Chama Merav Chisda, Chaviti Kohen Gadol B'mem Chalkan Lechalos. So, Biyad Obekli, right? So Rami Bar Chama asked, when it comes to the Chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, how would it be? How do you divide the dough into loaves? Do you divide it biyad with your hands, or bikli, or do you use a measuring utensils? So pshita de biyad. Clearly, you have to do it by hand. Bikli tortane yachnis. Well, then, because if you used it, if you needed a vessel, right, you would have to measure, right? The way that you would measure that the amount of dough is the same in two piles, it doesn't fill a volume. You would have to weigh it, and then you would have to bring a scale into the Beit HaMikdash. So v'yachnis. All right, so we'll let him bring a scale into the Beit HaMikdash. No, Kevin de Biklola Ksiv Lav Orach Ara. Because a scale is referenced in a curse, we are not going to bring a scale into the Beit HaMikdash. What is that a reference to? Well, that's the reference to the blessings and curses that are at, and specifically the curses that are at the end of Sefer Vayikra, in Parak Vav of Sefer Vayikra. Kevan de Beklal Ksiv v'heishivo lachmachem b'mashkal. That you're going to have to measure the amount of bread that you're going to have with a scale. And so as a result, the idea is that we don't want to bring a scale, which is part of a curse, and in connection with measuring bread, we don't want to bring that into the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so now that was also a lesson by Rami Bar Chama. So now we have a third lesson, third question that Rami Bar Chama posed. Rami Bar Chama Mirav Chisda, he asked, Shulchan, when it comes to the table in the Beit HaMikdash, Maushi Yakadesh Kmatzim Begodeshalo. What's the story with respect to sanctifying the komets that is if it's piled up on it? So what does that mean? Rashi in the Ksiv Yad helps us out. Take a look. We're going to do two Rashis. The first Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down in Rashi Ksiv Yad at the bottom of the page, end of the line. Begodesh Shalo. Hashulchan Ein Lo Toch. Right? The table in the Kodesh of the Beit HaMikdash did not have any kind of receptacle. And so, so what's the story? Im natan alav shnei komse levona. If you put the komets of levona that was taken and brought with the lechem hapanim and put on the shulchan along with the lechem hapanim, but you did so below bezichin without using the spoon. Now, usually it's brought with a spoon and the spoon is put on the shulchan. So eitz alechem, and you put that next to the bread. So mahu, what's the story with it? Shia kadsho, is it considered as if it's been sanctified? Ki'ilu hayasham habazichin, do we treat it as if the spoons were there as well or not? So that's the question. So, Mekadesh Lechem, do we say that since the table can sanctify the bread, Kamatzim Nami Makadesh, it has the ability to sanctify the komets as well? Odilma Techazile Makadesh. No, it only sanctifies what is fit to be put on it directly, meaning you put bread directly on the table. Delo chazile lo makadesh. But what you don't put on the table directly, or what you're not supposed to put on the table directly, namely you're supposed to put it on the spoons, the lavona, maybe not. So Amr Le ain't a makadesh. So Rav Chisda answers, and he says that it is not sanctified. Any 1 second, are you really sure that that's your answer? V'hama Rabbi Yochanan, didn't Rabbi Yochanan said, L'divrei ha'omer tfachayim u'mechza kofil, when it came to the person who says that each of the breads were 2.5 tfachim tall, nimtza shulchan mekadesh chamisha eser tefach lamala. We would find that the table, the shulchan in the base of English, was able to consecrate things that were up to 15 tfachim taller, meaning you had 6 loaves in each pile. Each loaf was 2.5 tfachim. 6 times 2.5 is 15. And so as a result, even something as high as 15 tfachim would be consecrated because the entire pile of the lechem apanim was consecrated. Divrei ha'omer tfachayim kofel, and the one who says that it was just 2 tfachim high, nimsa shulchan mekadesh shneimesar tefach. We would find that actually the shulchan can sanctify something that's a total of 12 tvachim tall, because each challah was 2 tvachim tall. 6 times 2 is 12, and so as a result, doesn't this show that you can consecrate things in the airspace above the shulchan? So Amar Le, no, Eino mekadesh l'karev. No, it does not consecrate something to be in order to bring it on the base on the altar. Aval mekadesh lipasel. However, it can consecrate something so that it can become disqualified. Meaning that even though when it comes to the bread is qualified. The point is that it's consecrated, but it's never going to be brought on the mizbeach. What is brought on the mizbeach is the lavona, and so as a result, for the purpose of being consecrated, so that it can become disqualified, and if something bad happens, if it becomes tamei or something like that, that the shulchan can do in the airspace above it. But in order to consecrate it so that you can then take it and put it on the mizbeach and burn it, that the shulchan does not have the ability to do. And so as a result, that statement that we said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, is not inconsistent with Rami Bar Chama's statement that the shulchan cannot consecrate the komets of Levona if you don't use the spoon. Okay, so we get to the next Mishnah. Sheva midos shalach. So our first Mishnah gave us the measurements for dry, and now we have the wet measurements, Hayu b'mikdash. And we say, in the Tanakhama says that there were 7 utensils, 7 different sizes for the wet measurement utensils. Hin, b'chatzi hin, u'shlishit hin, u'reviz hin. There was a full hin. Now remember, a hin is equal to 12 lugin. So you'd have a full hin, a half a hin, that's 6 lugin, a third of a hin, that's 4 lugin, a quarter of a hin, that's 3 lugin. Log, you would have something that's the size of a log. You'd have v'chatzi log, a half log, urvius, and you'd have a log, and you'd have a quarter of a log. So again, hin, half, third, quarter, log, half, and quarter. So 4 plus 3, that's seven. Seven different measurements. Rabbi Eliezer bar Rabbi Tzadok Omer shnasos hayu bahin. No, there were. It wasn't seven. There was really just one, and you have everything with markings on it. There was a hin measurement ad kan lapar. Up to here gets a par is for a par. Va'ad kan la'ayil, va'ad kan lekevis. You would have different markings on it. At a half it would be for the bull. At a third it would be for the ram. At a quarter it would be for the lamb. So Rabbi Shimon Omer, and similarly you would say there would be even lower marks for the log and the chatzi log and the revius. So there would be one that would effectively be able to measure seven different sizes. This is similar to our own measuring cups, marked measuring cups that we have today. Maybe the glass measuring cups would have that kind of marking on them. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says no. Lo hayasham hin. There was no hin vessel there because it wasn't needed. After all, what would the hin do? There isn't something that requires a hin. Elamida yasera shel log umechza. There would be seven, but the seventh one was a log and a half, right? So we'd have something that would be a quarter hin, which is 3 log, and then half of that would be a log and a half. And then you'd have a log, and then you'd have a half log and a quarter log. And why would you need a log and a half? Sheba hayamoded leminchas kohen gadol. That would be the amount that you would need for the mincha of the kohen gadol, because you use log umechza baboker, log umechza ben arbaim, because you need a log and a half in the morning and a log and a half in the afternoon. All right, so we'll pick up, God willing, from there in the next recording. Looking forward to continuing our learning together.